Could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy.
And I saw the film, and I was really, I mean, it's something that's very relatable because a lot of people, they either have lost someone very important, or they're close to somebody that's lost somebody very important. And so, this is sort of like a very tender, a very lighthearted, and a very subtle, subtle comedic film about tragedy, as you say.
Yeah.
Your influences, like you talk about Hal Ashby, and even Alexander Payne. He did The Descendants.
Yeah.
And was there, like you say, you want to accomplish all these things? Did all your movie history and all being a fan of those guys, did that play into all the things you wanted to accomplish?
It definitely did, and those are clear influences for me. Mike Nichols, let's say, is another one, but it's just amazing. If you get what you wanted, or you think you got what you wanted, it's kind of like be careful what you wish for, because you write a script. If you're lucky, you get the money. I hadn't made a movie before, so I was excited, and I was like, I want to make a movie. So we got the money, not a lot of it. Then all of a sudden it flips from ambition to, uh-oh, I hope I can do this. And then you look at your schedule. This was a 20-day shoot to make this movie, which is not a lot of time to make a feature film. So my fantasies about being like Hal Ashby or Mike Nichols or Alexander Payne, man, did those go out the window like day one? Because you look at the schedule and you're like, oh my God, I'm shooting this much on day one and we're shooting this much the next day. It just becomes this race to try to get your shots, to try to get your scenes, so that you have a movie. Because the clock's going to run out, and then what I shot is what I shot. That's what I get to edit with. So, my DP was great, and we talked a lot about what we wanted to achieve, and I told him what I was trying to do. And I did get to do a lot of it, but it was very humbling because, you're just dealing with certain constraints. So I'm not apologizing for the movie. I like what I ended up with here, but I hope someday I get bigger budgets and I can do more or explore some of the ideas that I wasn't able to explore in my first movie.
And I was kind of going into this thinking, oh, it's like low budget. And I'm like consistently surprised at some of the people I'm seeing in this movie. Of course, Kevin Kline, but it never ends, like Mary Steenburgen and Gillian Jacobs. But one of my favorites was Beck Bennett from SNL. Are these some of your comedy buds that have come on to play some characters in this?
It's weird. I have tons of friends from comedy. Most of them are comedians, but I know some actors, and I know a bunch of musicians because you end up kind of rolling in the same circles. But Rory Scovel was the only person I knew of my cast who's also a comedian before this. Kate Berlant is really funny. Beck Bennett's great. I knew him from his work, but I didn't know him personally. So people did me a favor, and it was kind of heartwarming that people agreed to do some parts that weren't that big. Like Beck, he kind of showed up and did this one scene. I think he's great in it. But that was nice. He's a great comedy actor, and it was nice that he was like, yeah, I'll do it. It's cool.
What some of the things I'm hearing is, they wanted more of Kevin Kline and Mary Steenburgen, or they want more of just you and Gillian. Like,
right.
Did it cross your mind this could be two totally separate movies? Like, there's so much here.
I guess so. I hadn't thought about it when I was writing it, and of course, I didn't know who I'd get to play any of the parts. So it's funny, you write a script, you just try to get the story to work, and then if you're lucky, I keep saying this, but it's true, because I feel like luck happens to play a larger part in things maybe than you wish sometimes, but Kevin Kline says, yes, I'll do it. Well, now you already have your story, so I didn't think, wow, I'd actually get Kevin Kline. I do remember thinking, geez, I want Kevin and Mary to be in the same movie as everyone else. Tonally, when I'm done, I don't want it to feel like there's two different movies happening. I want them to live in the same world here, because that's Kevin and Mary. They're bona fide movie stars. They happen to be Academy Award winners, for Christ's sake. And then you got me and my friends, So that was certainly a trick. But it added to me some real dimension to the movie. Even forgetting the accomplishments or caliber of the actors in both halves of the movie, let's call it, just having people of different ages telling their stories and showing an older man and woman going through the first stages of courtship or whatever you want to call it, and showing hopefully how awkward that can be at whatever age you're doing it, not just for someone in their 20s or 30s, but what happens when you're newly single again? Like, what is that like if you're 60? I lost my dad when I was young. I was 20. He was 46. My mom was widowed at 41. My dad's name was Dean, so that was why I called the movie Dean. I never thought about talking about it in my comedy or doing a one-man show about it or anything like that. But then when it came time to try to make my first film, I felt like there was a story worth telling there. And I thought not just about grief, but more specifically about coming out of grief. And what is it like if you've lost a parent young, and what are you left with? What does your family look like after that? I think we all deal with loss. Some of us later in life, but for some people, unfortunately, it happens earlier. So yeah, to me, that was something worth sharing. Certainly a scarier topic to explore than the typical premises I like to do jokes about, which are usually about objects or animals or day-to-day life, smaller things usually. So yeah, I was like, this is a risk, but I thought it was the kind of movie I'd want to see, so that was a good starting point for me.
Yeah, and I wonder what it would have been like if you had saw this. Somebody made a film like this, when you were experiencing.
Yeah.
What you were experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. That's one of the things I love about movies is when they work for me, it makes me feel more connected to other people, and I feel, I guess you'd say, a little less alienated. The internet sometimes makes me feel less connected to people, and I feel, like a lot of people, defensive and vigilant, and I just feel like people can be really mean and really snarky, and you can just look at the wrong sequence of things on the internet and you just hate people and you want to be left alone and stuff. On the other hand, if I watch a movie that is authentic or honest or feels like it's sharing something about the human condition, then maybe I feel a little more connected to people, or at least I have a little more empathy for other people,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of movies that do that, different emotions. I remember I watched, this kind of reminded me of one of my favorite movies, Swingers, with Jon Favreau.
Oh, yeah.
And he sort of has that kind of like a deadpan, like, sense of humor. And he's going through a breakup in that film.
Yeah.
And he actually, it's funny because he comes from like Philadelphia, he's a stand-up comic. And then
Yeah.
he goes to LA and he meets all these like, LA
Yeah.
people asking him who his booking agent is.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and I kind of thought of that when you're doing there's a whole fun part of this film is when you do go to LA and we see
Yeah.
some of the fun stuff. So what's, are most of the funny moments, do you think, like there, like are in that area?
Yeah, I think so. Like kind of in the beginning of the second act. Yeah, when you mention Swingers, I think about when they go from one party to another and they all have their own cars. It's like there's some great memorable bits in that movie for me, for sure. I think, yeah, one of the tricks with this movie was, hey, I wanted to tell a story that was personal and meaningful, hopefully, and certainly emotionally grounded, I guess you'd say, like certainly from my experience, losing a and trying to figure out life after that. But I wanted it to be funny. I'm a comic. I like jokes. I wanted to find ways to make it a funny movie, and I don't want to be morose and moping around and, oh, poor me and everything. I'm like, all right, let's try to find a balance here. Going to L.A., I put that in the movie because I've certainly had that experience as a comic. A lot of us have who do comedy or any showbiz job. You're going to end up in L.A. more likely than not, depending on what you're doing. You don't have to, but look, if you're trying to sell movies or if you're a stand-up, you're at the very least going to spend time there auditioning, touring. Maybe you get a job on a show for a little while. Yeah, so I thought back to my own travels, and I was like, yeah, the loneliest I've ever felt in my life was when I was single and I'd end up in L.A. Within like 2 days, I was like, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I don't know anybody. I can't go walking anywhere. Like, what the hell's going on? This was really tough. Now I live there, so I've got a wife and kids, so it's a different city for me now. But I thought there was some comedy there for sure, being the transplant. I also wanted to cover topics that are kind of well-worn, but do something a little different with them. So maybe go a little bit deeper, take a slightly different angle on it. So even if I started in kind of a typical place, it moved a little bit.
Yeah, that was a good choice. Last thing, we got to let you go, but I want to end on a fun note, which is that one moment where Rory has the cats, and then at the end he kind of like looks at the camera for a second. How fun was? I mean, how fun was that?
Yeah, that's funny. Nobody's mentioned that to me. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one of my favorite shots in the movie. So I shot this scene with Rory Scovel, who plays my friend Eric, and I'm in his apartment, and his roommate's there, and this cat that he cares a lot about, and you know, we kind of enter that character's world. It's pretty intimate in a way because it's like, wow, this is where he lives. This is his room. And when we were shooting it, I asked Rory, I said, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you just look into the camera? Because we did the scene, and it was making me laugh a lot. I just thought he was really funny and really vulnerable at the same time. I liked his performance a lot. I was like, yeah, just kind of look into the camera, which you're kind of not supposed to do. You know, depending on the story you're telling, you don't usually have characters looking right down the barrel. It happens and depends, you know, how much you want to break the fourth wall. So it was just like a weird move, but it just, when I got to the edit, I saw that shot and I was like, I'm using that. Like, I like that. That's going to work.
Yeah, I love it. You know, this film's personal. It's fresh, like you mentioned. You know, a lot of new things from a new director, and so I think it's an easy watch and something I'll recommend to my friends.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Thank
Dimitri.
you.